So we're starting with this text by the great 18th century philosopher Immanuel Kant, who was one of the most important philosophers of all time, and was one of those guys who lived at a time where geniuses like him could talk about everything. And philosophically, his influence reaches to every area of philosophy: metaphysics, epistemology, moral philosophy, applied ethics, aesthetics, political philosophy, and probably lots of other things that I can't think of right now. And Kant's writing is, sort of notoriously difficult, but not this piece. This is a different sort of thing. This is a newspaper piece, which is itself kind of important and telling, considering what we're doing in this course, what we're looking at. It was a newspaper piece that he published in 1784 and answered the question, what is enlightenment? And it is an incredibly important text, not only historically, but I think in terms of pointing out something about modern culture, really basically modern Western culture, which is essential, or at least in how that culture understands itself, which is not only a culture that sees itself, a society that sees itself naturally in a position of perpetual change. That is, that change is good as long as it's progress. And that this change can be thought of as a process of enlightenment. That is, a progressive change. Change towards something better is the very definition of enlightenment. And what's really interesting, and the reason that I'm asking you to read it, is Kant's insistence, or his claim about what is necessary for enlightenment to proceed, for a society to become more enlightened. And that turns out to be the guarantee of one freedom, and that is the freedom of speech. He makes an important distinction in the essay between what he calls the public and the private uses of reason. These uses of reason we would probably, in contemporary language, just call speech. Speaking, saying things. And his idea is that the private use of reason can be restricted. That is, it can be unfree, it can be limited, it can be censored. And that's okay, at least temporarily. But that the one thing that is incredibly important, the one vital thing for a modern society, a society that believes that it is undergoing a process of becoming better, of enlightening itself, the one thing that's necessary is that the public use of reason, which we would, again, likely call public speech, that the public use of reason remain free and absolutely free. And really, Kant's piece is really an argument, that's situated in his time, living in Prussia under an emperor. The kind of things that he was saying need to be understood in that light. That is, that he's living in a society which is not free. And he's not even saying that it should become free overnight. In fact, that's not his argument at all. But that people in that society should be allowed free speech. And again, not total free speech. It makes important distinctions here. The private use of reason includes things like, as he says here on the second page, the way that a priest or a pastor or a rabbi or whatever, a clergy person, would address their congregation. The kind of restrictions that a military officer would be under. The kind of restrictions that, that a taxpayer would be under. That is, there's all sorts of places in which you simply need to obey and to toe the party line, so to speak. And Kant believes that that's necessary. But that at the same time, you should always be able to put on the guise of what he calls the the man of learning addressing the public at large, and that's what really defines free speech is whom you're addressing. As we see, there's one thing to address a particular set of people, let's say a congregation if you're a priest. It's quite another thing to address the public at large. And that's the public use of reason. And that's the use of reason that Kant says that at all times must remain free. The question is why? I mean, we may take it for granted that public speech that is addressed to the public at large, to the world, needs to be free, that we all need to have the liberty to speak freely in that medium. We may take it for granted, but Kant really gives us kind of a grand answer, and that is that this is necessary for enlightenment, and enlightenment is mankind's destiny. Let's see if we can find a good place where he says this. I don't know. You'll see it as you read it. He says in several places, or a few places, that, for instance, if we were to say that somehow learning should stop, or criticism should stop, or inquiry should stop because we had all the answers, let's say in religion, that he says that would be a violation of the fundamental rights and dignity of mankind, of human beings as a whole, because it is their destiny to get closer and closer to truth, to justice, to a rational way of life, and that the only way that this can be done, the only way that human beings will actually make progress in enlightenment, is if they have free speech, if they have the freedom to say whatever they think, at least in some arenas, and to criticize whatever they want. Take that away from them, and you've taken away from them their birthright. Moreover, Kant believed, and this is where I think the contrast with the contemporary situation become interesting, ironic, and rather troubling. Kant believed that the only thing necessary for us to make progress in enlightenment was this intellectual freedom, this freedom of speech. He says on the last page, at the bottom of the last column, men will, of their own accord, gradually work their way out of barbarism, so long as artificial measures are not deliberately adopted to keep them in it. The idea being that the freedom of speech, or freedom of the public use of reason, is a sufficient condition, not just a necessary condition, but a sufficient condition for society to make progress and enlightenment. That is, that the only thing we really need to do to make sure that our society gets better, that we move closer to what we want to be, is if there is free speech, free criticism, if there is no restriction on what people can say, the opinions they can hold, or the criticisms of contemporary institutions that they can make. This is a starting point for the course. And in a way, the whole course is a questioning of Kant, a questioning of this assumption that free speech is our salvation, that a medium for the public use of reason that is entirely free is all we need to progress as a society. I think that the contemporary world, contemporary media, the internet, basically, social media, calls into question this fundamental assumption that Kant makes. And again, much of the course is sort of exploring the kind of challenges to this Kantian Enlightenment view of speech that we get in this wonderful and incredibly important essay by Kant.